Extraordinary results are not built in extraordinary moments. They are built in ordinary moments repeated without fail. The disciplined person is not stronger than you. They are not smarter than you. They are not more talented than you. They simply refuse to negotiate with the habits that create success. Every day, they do what must be done. When they feel motivated, they do it. When they feel tired, they do it. When they don't feel like it, they do it anyway. This audiobook will show you the daily habits that separate disciplined people from everyone else, and why mastering these habits can completely transform your future. Chapter 1. Stop waiting to feel ready. Most people spend their lives waiting for confidence, waiting for certainty, waiting for the perfect moment, waiting for a sign, waiting until they feel ready. And while they wait, life moves forward without them. Opportunities pass. Time disappears. Potential remains unrealized. The truth is simple. You will never feel completely ready. Not for the business, not for the career change, not for the difficult conversation, not for the new goal, not for the life you want. That's the first lesson disciplined people understand. Action comes before confidence, not after. Read that again. Action comes before confidence, not after. Most people believe confidence creates action. Disciplined people know the opposite is true. Action creates confidence. You do not become confident and then start. You start, and confidence begins to grow. That's the key. The greatest lie you tell yourself is that you need more certainty before you move. You don't. You have a choice. You can continue waiting, or you can begin. Because every successful person you admire once stood exactly where you are, uncertain, afraid, unprepared, and yet they moved anyway. Think about the entrepreneur launching a company. Do you believe they knew exactly what would happen? Of course not. No entrepreneur starts with complete certainty. Markets change. Customers change. Problems appear. Challenges emerge. The successful entrepreneur doesn't wait for certainty. They start. Then they learn. Then they adapt. Then they improve. The same principle applies everywhere. Consider an athlete preparing for competition. Do they wait until they feel guaranteed victory? No. They train before they feel capable. They practice before they feel confident. They compete before they feel ready. And every repetition builds belief. Every action creates evidence. Every small win strengthens confidence. That's how discipline works. Not through feelings, through behavior. It's not about confidence. It's about action. It's not about certainty. It's about movement. It's not about readiness. It's about discipline. That's the difference. Many people spend years preparing for a life they never begin. They read another book, watch another video, take another course, gather more information, and somehow convince themselves they're making progress. But preparation without execution becomes procrastination. At some point, learning becomes hiding. At some point, planning becomes avoidance. At some point, waiting becomes surrender. You have a choice. You can stay in preparation forever, or you can step into reality. Because reality is where growth happens. Reality is where confidence is built. Reality is where transformation begins. You do not need certainty. You need a start. That phrase may be the most important lesson in this entire chapter. You do not need certainty. You need a start. Say it again. You do not need certainty. You need a start. The disciplined person understands something most people never learn. Clarity comes from action, not from thinking, not from worrying, not from endless analysis, from action. People often ask themselves, "What if I fail?" But disciplined people ask a different question. What happens if I never start? That question changes everything, because failure teaches. Failure informs. Failure develops strength. But inaction teaches nothing. Inaction produces nothing. Inaction guarantees stagnation. Many people fear making mistakes. Disciplined people fear wasting their lives. That's the key. Let's make this practical. Imagine a task appears on your schedule, a difficult project, an important phone call, a workout, a presentation, a business idea. What does the average person do? They delay. They negotiate. They think about it. They wait for the perfect mindset. They tell themselves they'll start later. Tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. And eventually, the opportunity disappears. Now look at the disciplined person. The task appears. They begin immediately. Not because they feel excited. Not because they feel motivated. Not because they feel ready. Because they understand a fundamental truth. The longer you wait, the weaker your commitment becomes. Every minute of delay gives your mind another opportunity to create excuses. Another opportunity to generate fear. Another opportunity to avoid discomfort. That's why disciplined people move quickly. They understand that hesitation feeds resistance. Action destroys resistance. You don't need their permission. You don't need approval. You don't need guarantees. You don't need perfect conditions. You need movement. The moment a meaningful task appears, begin. Start the first page. Write the first sentence. Make the first call. Take the first step. Open the document. Walk into the gym. Start. Because starting is where power lives. Not thinking, not planning, not wishing. Starting. The world celebrates finished products. But every finished product began with an imperfect first step. Every successful company, every best-selling book, every championship athlete, every extraordinary achievement, all of them started before they felt fully prepared. All of them started while uncertainty existed. All of them started despite fear. And so must you. Discipline is not the absence of fear. Discipline is moving despite fear. Discipline is not the absence of doubt. Discipline is acting despite doubt. Discipline is not waiting for the perfect moment. Discipline is creating momentum when the moment feels imperfect. That's the habit you must build. When action is required, act. When movement is needed, move. When opportunity appears, begin. Train yourself to start immediately. Train yourself to trust action. Train yourself to stop negotiating with your future. Because extraordinary results come from ordinary actions repeated without fail. And every extraordinary result begins the same way. With a start. One decision. One action. One moment where you stop waiting and start moving. You do not need certainty. You need a start. Remember that. Live that. Practice that. Because the future belongs to those who move before they feel ready. You mastered the first battle. The battle against hesitation. The battle against waiting. The battle against the illusion of readiness. Now it's time to learn how disciplined people create momentum from the moment they wake up. Because success is often decided before most people even begin their day. Chapter 2. Win the first hour of the day. Every day begins with a decision. Most people don't realize they're making it, but they are. The moment you wake up, you begin setting the direction of your day. Not at noon, not in the afternoon, not after work. The first hour matters more than most people understand. Because the first hour does not simply start your day, it programs your day. That's the key. The habits you repeat during the first 60 minutes create momentum, and momentum is powerful. Once momentum begins moving in one direction, it becomes easier to continue moving in that direction. A productive morning creates a productive afternoon. A distracted morning creates a distracted afternoon. A focused morning creates a focused day. A chaotic morning creates a chaotic day. This is why disciplined people protect their mornings. They understand something the average person ignores. The first battle of the day determines many of the battles that follow. You have a choice. You can wake up and immediately surrender your attention, or you can take ownership of it. Most people surrender. The alarm rings. Before their feet touch the floor, they reach for their phone. Notifications, messages, emails, social media, news headlines, videos, endless scrolling, and before the day has even started, someone else is already controlling their attention. Think about that. You wake up with a fresh mind, fresh energy, fresh focus, and within minutes, you hand all of it away. You allow strangers, algorithms, advertisements, and distractions to decide what enters your mind first. Then you wonder why you feel overwhelmed. You wonder why you struggle to focus. You wonder why your motivation disappears. The answer is simple. You lost control before the day even began. Disciplined people refuse to do this. They understand that attention is a valuable asset, and valuable assets must be protected. That's why successful people often look different in the morning. Not because they possess special talents, not because they have magical routines, because they intentionally guard their focus. While others consume, they create. While others react, they act. While others scroll, they move. That's the difference. Own the morning. Own the day. Remember that phrase. Own the morning. Own the day. The first hour is not about perfection. It's about direction. Let's compare two people. Both wake up at exactly the same time. Both have similar goals. Both want success. Both want better health. Both want financial growth. Both want a better future. But their mornings are different. The first person wakes up and immediately checks social media. 10 minutes becomes 20. 20 becomes 30. Then comes email. Then messages. Then random videos. Their mind becomes crowded before they even begin meaningful work. Stress arrives. Comparison arrives. Distraction arrives. The day begins in reaction mode. Now consider the second person. They wake up. They drink water. They move their body. They review their goals. They spend a few moments thinking about what truly matters today. No distractions. No scrolling. No chaos. Just intention. Just focus. Just purpose. Who do you think has a greater chance of winning the day? The answer is obvious. Yet millions of people continue choosing the first path every morning, not because they have to, because it has become a habit. And habits shape destiny. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your habits. That's the key. Disciplined people understand that mornings should be proactive, not reactive. Reactive people spend their lives responding. Proactive people spend their lives creating. One group waits for life to happen. The other group makes life happen. You have a choice. Every morning, you choose which person you become. The good news is that winning the first hour doesn't require an elaborate routine. You don't need a 3-hour morning ritual. You don't need expensive equipment. You don't need perfect circumstances. You need consistency. That's all. The goal is not complexity. The goal is control. Let's build a simple morning sequence. Step 1. Wake up at a consistent time. Not when you feel like it. not based on your mood. Consistency creates stability, and stability creates discipline. Step 2. Move your body, even for 5 minutes. Stretch, walk, exercise. Wake up physically before demanding performance mentally. Step 3. Avoid unnecessary digital distractions. No endless scrolling. No random videos. No pointless consumption. Protect your attention. Step 4. Review your priorities. Ask yourself a simple question. What must be accomplished today? Not next week. Not next month. Today. Step 5. Begin meaningful work as early as possible. Momentum loves speed. The longer you delay, the harder it becomes. This sequence isn't complicated. That's exactly why it works. The most effective habits are often the simplest. People fail because they chase complexity. Disciplined people succeed because they master fundamentals. Remember that. The basics never stop working. Many people say, "I'll follow my routine when conditions improve, when the weather gets better, when work becomes easier, when life becomes less stressful, when motivation returns." But disciplined people know better. They understand that consistency matters most when conditions are difficult. Anyone can follow a routine when everything feels easy. The real test comes when things become uncomfortable. Rainy morning? Do it anyway. Tired? Do it anyway. Busy? Do it anyway. Unmotivated? Do it anyway. That's discipline. It's not about doing what feels good. It's about doing what works. The weather doesn't decide your habits. Your mood doesn't decide your habits. Your circumstances don't decide your habits. You decide. That's power. That's ownership. That's responsibility. Own the morning. Own the day. Say it again. Own the morning. Own the day. Because the first hour is more than a collection of actions. It is a declaration. A declaration that you will lead your day instead of following it. A declaration that your attention belongs to you. A declaration that your future is worth protecting. Every extraordinary life is built one day at a time, and every day begins with a morning. Win enough mornings and you begin winning weeks. Win enough weeks and you begin winning months. Win enough months and you begin changing your life. That's how extraordinary results are created. Not through dramatic moments, through disciplined mornings repeated without fail. You have already learned to stop waiting to feel ready. Now you must learn to take control from the very beginning of the day, because discipline becomes easier when momentum is on your side. And momentum begins the moment you wake up. You have taken control of your mornings. Now it's time to tackle the task that most people avoid, the task that silently drains energy, focus, and confidence. Chapter 3. Do the hard thing first. Most people don't have a productivity problem. They have an avoidance problem. They know what needs to be done. They know what matters most. They know which task would move their life forward. And yet they avoid it. Day after day, week after week, year after year. That's the real problem. Not ignorance, not lack of opportunity. Avoidance. The uncomfortable truth is that most people organize their lives around avoiding discomfort. They don't wake up asking, "What is most important?" They wake up asking, "What is easiest?" And that single question quietly shapes their future. Because easy tasks rarely create extraordinary results. Easy tasks feel productive, but difficult tasks create progress. That's the key. The task you avoid controls your life. Read that again. The task you avoid controls your life. The phone call you keep postponing. The project you keep delaying. The business you keep talking about. The workout you keep skipping. The difficult conversation you refuse to have. The skill you need to learn. The decision you need to make. Those are the things holding the keys to your next level. Yet most people spend their days running from them. Why? Because the human brain loves comfort. Your brain wants safety. It wants familiarity. It wants certainty. It wants immediate pleasure. It does not naturally seek challenge. It naturally seeks relief. That's why discipline matters. Discipline exists because your feelings cannot be trusted. Your feelings want comfort. Your future demands growth. And growth is uncomfortable. You have a choice. You can obey your feelings, or you can obey your goals. The two are often moving in opposite directions. Think about the most successful people you know: entrepreneurs, athletes, leaders, creators. They are not successful because they enjoy every difficult task. They are successful because they do difficult tasks anyway. That's the difference. People often imagine disciplined individuals as highly motivated. But motivation is not what separates them. Action separates them. They wake up and face resistance immediately. They don't negotiate. They don't debate. They don't postpone. They attack. Because they understand something powerful. The longer you avoid a difficult task, the larger it becomes in your mind. A 10-minute task becomes a source of stress for 10 days. A simple conversation becomes a month of anxiety. A small challenge grows into a massive burden. Not because the task changed, because avoidance magnified it. That's the danger. Avoidance always charges interest. Every day you delay, the emotional cost increases. The stress increases. The guilt increases. The pressure increases. Meanwhile, the task remains. Waiting, growing, controlling your attention, controlling your energy, controlling your confidence. The task you avoid controls your life. That's why disciplined people do the hard thing first, not because it's pleasant, because it's freeing. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack all day. Every hour it becomes more exhausting. Now imagine setting it down first thing in the morning. The relief is immediate. The difficult task works the same way. When you complete it early, everything else becomes easier. Your confidence rises. Your energy improves. Your focus sharpens. Momentum appears. That's the reward. The average person seeks comfort first and struggles later. The disciplined person accepts discomfort first and enjoys freedom later. One path feels easier now. The other path creates a better future. You have a choice: comfort now or freedom later. Discomfort now or regret later. The decision belongs to you. Let's make this practical. Tomorrow morning, identify the single task that matters most. Not the easiest task. Not the quickest task. The most important task. Ask yourself, if I completed only one thing today, what would create the greatest impact? That's your target. That's the thing you must attack first. Before emails, before notifications, before busy work, before distractions. Do it first. Many people start their day by checking messages, responding to requests, solving other people's problems, and then they wonder why their own goals never move forward. Because they gave their best energy away. They spent their prime hours reacting. Disciplined people don't do that. They protect their highest energy for their highest priorities. That's the key. Your best hours deserve your best work, not your leftovers, not your scraps, your best. Because greatness is built during moments of focus, not moments of convenience. Look at elite athletes. They don't train hardest when they feel strongest. They train hardest when the schedule says it's time. Look at military training. Soldiers don't wait for comfort. They learn to perform under pressure. They learn to act despite resistance. Because success in difficult moments requires preparation in ordinary moments. The same principle applies to your life. Every time you do the hard thing first, you strengthen a muscle. Not a physical muscle, a mental muscle, the discipline muscle. And like any muscle, it grows through resistance, not comfort. Every difficult task completed makes the next difficult task easier. Every act of courage builds more courage. Every victory over procrastination builds more confidence. Not confidence from positive thinking, confidence from evidence, confidence from action, confidence from proof. That's real confidence. Most people try to feel confident before acting. Disciplined people act until confidence arrives. You learned that in the first chapter. Now you're putting it into practice. The hard thing first. Always. Because life rewards action, not intention, not potential, not promises. Action. Think about how many dreams die in the comfort zone, how many businesses never start, how many books never get written, how many opportunities disappear, how many lives remain smaller than they could have been, all because someone chose comfort over challenge, all because someone delayed what mattered most. Don't be that person. You don't need their permission. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need a better mood. You need action. The hard thing first. Every day, every week, every month, every year. Make it your standard. Make it your identity. Become the person who attacks discomfort. Become the person who moves toward resistance. Become the person who does what others avoid. Because that is where opportunity lives. That is where growth lives. That is where extraordinary results are created. Remember, the task you avoid controls your life. The moment you confront it, you take your power back. The moment you complete it, you create momentum. The moment you repeat this habit consistently, you become dangerous. Dangerous to excuses. Dangerous to procrastination. Dangerous to mediocrity. And that's exactly what discipline is supposed to do. You have learned to start before you feel ready. You have learned to win the first hour of the day. You have learned to attack the hardest task first. Now it's time to remove the escape route entirely, because discipline becomes unstoppable when quitting is no longer an option. Chapter 4. Remove the option to quit. Most people think discipline is about making better decisions. It isn't. Discipline is about needing fewer decisions. That's the secret. The average person wakes up every day and negotiates with themselves. Should I work out today? Should I write today? Should I study today? Should I save money today? Should I work on my goals today? Every day becomes another debate, another internal argument, another opportunity to fail. And eventually, emotions win. Because emotions are persuasive. They always have an excuse. You're tired. You're stressed. You're busy. You deserve a break. You'll start tomorrow. Tomorrow is one of the most dangerous words in the world. More dreams have died in tomorrow than in failure. That's why disciplined people think differently. They do not rely on daily decisions. They rely on systems. That's the key. A decision requires willpower. A system requires execution. And execution is far more reliable. The disciplined person doesn't wake up asking whether they should do the work. The schedule already answered the question. The routine already answered the question. The system already answered the question. There is nothing left to debate. Only action. This is why some people seem incredibly disciplined. From the outside, it looks like they possess extraordinary self-control. But often they have simply eliminated unnecessary choices. They removed the option to negotiate. They removed the option to quit. And when quitting disappears, progress accelerates. Remember this phrase: if quitting is available, quitting becomes likely. say it again. If quitting is available, quitting becomes likely. Most people keep the exit door open, just in case. Just in case they don't feel motivated. Just in case things become uncomfortable. Just in case the work becomes difficult. But the moment discomfort arrives, they walk through that open door. And discomfort always arrives. Always. Because every meaningful goal eventually becomes difficult. Every worthwhile pursuit eventually tests you. Every long-term commitment eventually becomes inconvenient. That's not a problem. That's the process. The problem is having an escape route prepared. The problem is giving yourself permission to quit before the challenge even begins. Disciplined people understand something powerful. Commitment must be established before motivation disappears, not after. Before. Because motivation is temporary. Motivation is emotional. Motivation changes daily, sometimes hourly. If your success depends on motivation, your success becomes unpredictable. That's why systems matter. Systems continue when motivation leaves. Let's look at a writer. Many aspiring writers wait for inspiration. They wait until they feel creative. They wait until the mood feels right. The result? Weeks pass. Months pass. Sometimes years pass. The book never gets written. Now look at professional writers. Many write at the same time every day, not because inspiration appears, because the schedule appears. They sit down. They write. Some days are excellent. Some days are average. Some days feel terrible. But they still write. The schedule never asks about their feelings. The schedule only asks for action. That's why books get finished. Not because of inspiration, because of consistency. Let's look at athletes. Elite athletes do not wake up and ask themselves whether training sounds enjoyable. Training is already scheduled. The decision was made long ago. When the clock says it's time, they train. Rain or sunshine. Good mood or bad mood. Energy or fatigue. The routine remains, and because the routine remains, improvement remains. The same principle applies to successful professionals. The highest performers often follow predictable systems, not exciting systems, not complicated systems, predictable systems. Because predictability creates results. The average person chases intensity. Disciplined people chase consistency. That's the difference. You have a choice. You can spend your life relying on motivation, or you can build systems. One approach creates occasional success. The other creates lasting success. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't wake up and debate whether it should happen. You don't create a pros and cons list. You don't wait for motivation. You simply do it. Why? Because it became automatic. It became part of your identity. It became a non-negotiable behavior. Now imagine applying that same level of certainty to your goals. What if exercise became automatic? What if reading became automatic? What if creating became automatic? What if personal growth became automatic? Your life would change dramatically. Not because you became more talented, because you became more consistent. And consistency always wins. The greatest threat to discipline is negotiation. Every time you negotiate with yourself, you weaken commitment. You say you'll work out. Then you negotiate. You say you'll start the project. Then you negotiate. You say you'll wake up early. Then you negotiate. And eventually, the negotiation becomes surrender. Disciplined people avoid this trap. The answer is already decided. The routine already exists. The commitment already stands. Action follows automatically. That's why many successful people create rules. Simple rules, clear rules, non-negotiable rules, not because they enjoy restrictions, because freedom comes from structure. That sounds backwards to many people, but it's true. Without structure, emotions take control. Without structure, distractions take control. Without structure, excuses take control. Structure creates freedom. Structure creates progress. Structure creates results. That's the key. If quitting is available, quitting becomes likely. So remove it. Don't decide every morning whether you'll work out. Schedule it. Don't decide every day whether you'll work on your goals. Schedule it. Don't decide whether you'll learn, grow, improve, or create. Build it into your system. The fewer decisions required, the higher the chance of success, because successful people don't trust their future to emotions. They trust their future to systems. And systems are powerful because they function even when motivation disappears, especially when motivation disappears. Remember, your future self will not always feel inspired. Your future self will not always feel energetic. Your future self will not always feel confident. But your future self can still follow a system. And that's enough. In fact, that's more than enough. Most extraordinary achievements are not built through extraordinary effort. They are built through ordinary effort repeated consistently, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. That's how discipline compounds. That's how habits compound. That's how success compounds. Not through dramatic moments, through reliable systems. So stop asking yourself whether you feel like doing the work. The question is irrelevant. Ask a better question. What does the system require? Then do that. No negotiation, no excuses, no debate, just execution. Because the moment quitting is removed, commitment becomes stronger. The moment commitment becomes stronger, consistency becomes easier. And the moment consistency becomes easier, extraordinary results become inevitable. You have learned to start before you feel ready. You have learned to win the first hour of the day. You have learned to do the hard thing first. And now you have learned to remove the option to quit. The next step is understanding the force that turns small actions into life-changing outcomes. Because success is rarely created in giant leaps. Success is created through repetition. Chapter 5. Master the Power of Repetition. Most people underestimate what they can achieve in 5 years, and they overestimate what they can achieve in 5 days. That's the problem. People are obsessed with dramatic change. They want immediate results, immediate transformation, immediate success, immediate proof that their effort is working. But life rarely works that way. Success is usually quieter than people expect, slower than people want, less exciting than social media makes it appear. The truth is simple. Greatness is rarely dramatic. It is usually boring consistency repeated over long periods. That's the key. The world celebrates breakthroughs, but breakthroughs are usually built on years of invisible repetition. People see the victory. They don't see the thousands of repetitions that created it. They see the successful business. They don't see the years of daily work. They see the fit body. They don't see the countless workouts. They see the best-selling author. They don't see the mornings spent writing when nobody cared. They see the result. They miss the repetition. And repetition is where the real power lives. Remember this phrase: small actions become massive results. Say it again. Small actions become massive results. Most people dismiss small actions because they appear insignificant. One workout doesn't change your body. One page doesn't write a book. $1 doesn't create wealth. One day of discipline doesn't transform a life. And because the action appears small, They ignore it. They wait for something bigger, something dramatic, something exciting. But disciplined people think differently. They understand that success is not built in a single moment. Success is built through accumulation. One action, then another, then another, then another. Until years later, the results appear extraordinary. Let's imagine two people. The first person improves by just 1% every day. The second person stays exactly the same. At the beginning, there is almost no visible difference. After a week, the difference is tiny. After a month, still difficult to notice. But after a year, the gap becomes enormous. Why? Because improvement compounds, just like interest compounds. Small actions become massive results. That's how life works. The problem is that compounding is invisible in the beginning, and people quit during the invisible stage. That's where dreams die. Not because the strategy failed, not because the goal was impossible, because the results arrived slower than expected. Most people plant a seed and then dig it up every few days to check for growth. Disciplined people plant the seed and continue watering it. They trust the process. They understand that results are often delayed, and delayed results still count. Think about physical fitness. Nobody becomes strong after one workout. Nobody becomes healthy after one healthy meal. Nobody transforms their body in a weekend. But what happens when someone trains consistently for 5 years? The transformation becomes undeniable. The body changes, the energy changes, the confidence changes, the identity changes, all because of repeated actions, not dramatic actions. Repeated actions. Consistency always defeats intensity. Remember that. Consistency always defeats intensity. Many people start with intensity. They become excited, motivated, inspired. For a few days, they go all in. They wake up at 5 in the morning, work out twice a day, read 3 books, create impossible schedules. Then reality arrives. Energy drops, motivation fades, the routine collapses, and they return to where they started. Why? Because intensity is difficult to sustain. Consistency is sustainable, and sustainable always wins. A person who exercises 30 minutes every day for 5 years will outperform someone who exercises 3 hours a day for 2 weeks and quits. A person who writes 1 page every day will eventually finish books. A person who saves a little money consistently will eventually build wealth. A person who improves one skill daily will eventually become exceptional. Consistency always defeats intensity. That's the key. The world often rewards patience more than talent. Because talent without consistency produces very little. But average talent combined with extraordinary consistency can create remarkable results. This is why disciplined people focus on the process, not the outcome. The outcome matters, but the process creates the outcome. You cannot directly control results. You can control behavior. You can control repetition. You can control showing up. You can control effort. And when those things are controlled consistently, results eventually follow. You have a choice. You can obsess over outcomes, or you can master repetition. One approach creates frustration. The other creates progress. Think about water dripping onto a rock. 1 drop changes nothing. 10 drops change nothing. 1,000 drops seem insignificant. Yet over time, the rock changes shape, not because of power, because of persistence. The same principle applies to your life. Most people search for powerful actions. Disciplined people search for repeatable actions, because repeatable actions change everything. Ask yourself this question: can I do this consistently for years? Not days, not weeks. Years. That question matters. Because a mediocre plan followed consistently is often better than a perfect plan abandoned quickly. Many people fail because they choose strategies they cannot sustain. The schedule is too extreme. The expectations are too unrealistic. The routine requires constant motivation. Eventually, they burn out. Disciplined people avoid this trap. They build systems that survive ordinary life. Systems that survive bad moods. Systems that survive difficult weeks. Systems that survive boredom, because boredom is part of mastery. Nobody talks about that. Everyone wants the reward. Few people want the repetition, yet repetition is the price of mastery. The musician repeats scales. The athlete repeats drills. The entrepreneur repeats daily disciplines. The writer repeats the writing process. Again, and again, and again. Repetition creates skill. Repetition creates confidence. Repetition creates excellence. Not because repetition is exciting, because repetition is effective. Most people quit when things become boring. Disciplined people continue when things become boring. That's why they eventually separate themselves from the crowd. Because success often belongs to the person willing to repeat simple actions longer than everyone else. Think about that. The difference between average and exceptional is often the willingness to continue. Continue when excitement fades. Continue when progress slows. Continue when recognition disappears. Continue when nobody is watching. Continue when quitting feels tempting. That's discipline. That's commitment. That's how greatness is built. Small actions become massive results. Never forget that. Every workout matters. Every page matters. Every disciplined decision matters. Every day matters. Not because any single day changes everything, because thousands of days eventually do. And those days are being accumulated right now. Whether you realize it or not, your habits are already creating your future. The question is simple. What future are they creating? Because repetition works whether the habit is good or bad. Repeat excuses and excuses become your identity. Repeat procrastination, and procrastination becomes your lifestyle. Repeat discipline, and discipline becomes your character. You have a choice. Every day you cast a vote. Not for who you are today, for who you become tomorrow. Make enough disciplined votes and the outcome becomes inevitable. That is the power of repetition. That is the power of consistency. That is the power of small actions repeated without fail. You have learned to start before you feel ready. You have learned to win the morning. You have learned to attack difficult tasks. You have learned to remove the option to quit. And now you understand that extraordinary success is built through ordinary actions repeated relentlessly. But repetition requires something precious, something increasingly rare in the modern world, your attention. And if you cannot protect your attention, consistency becomes impossible. Chapter 6. Protect your focus like your future depends on it. There is a war happening every single day. Most people don't even realize they are fighting it. It is not a war for money. It is not a war for status. It is not a war for possessions. It is a war for your attention. And whether you win or lose that war will determine the quality of your life. Because attention is the most valuable resource in the modern world. Not time. Attention. Everyone gets 24 hours. But not everyone controls where their attention goes. That's the difference. The most successful people are not always those with the most opportunities. They are often those who protect their focus the best. Because focus creates progress. Focus creates mastery. Focus creates results. And results create the life you want. That's the key. Where attention goes, life follows. Remember that phrase. Where attention goes, life follows. Whatever receives your attention eventually shapes your reality. If your attention constantly moves toward distraction, your life becomes distracted. If your attention constantly moves toward negativity, your life becomes negative. If your attention constantly moves toward growth, learning, discipline, and improvement, your life begins to reflect those things. Your attention is your life. Think about that. Every day, your attention is being invested somewhere. The question is simple. Where is it going? Most people never ask that question. They simply react. Notification, reaction, message, reaction, video, reaction, news headline, reaction, social media update, reaction. Their entire day becomes a series of interruptions. And then they wonder why they struggle to accomplish meaningful work. The answer is obvious. You cannot create a focused life with a distracted mind. You cannot build extraordinary results with fragmented attention. You cannot become exceptional while constantly interrupting yourself. Yet millions of people attempt exactly that every day. The modern world has made distraction easier than ever. One swipe, one click, one notification, one video, and suddenly 30 minutes disappear, then an hour, then an entire evening, then years. The scary part isn't the distraction itself. The scary part is how normal it has become. People no longer notice it. Constant distraction has become standard behavior. Checking phones every few minutes. Switching between tasks constantly. Watching videos while answering messages. Scrolling while eating. Scrolling before sleep. Scrolling after waking up. Never fully present. Never fully focused. Never fully engaged. That's the problem. Focus has become rare. And because it is rare, it has become valuable. The people who learn to focus gain a massive advantage, not because they work harder, because they work deeper. There is a difference. Many people spend 8 hours looking busy. Few people spend 2 hours deeply focused. The second group usually wins, because depth produces quality. Depth produces progress. Depth produces breakthroughs. That's why disciplined people guard their attention aggressively, not casually, aggressively. They understand that distractions are not harmless. Distractions have consequences. Every interruption carries a cost. Every distraction steals momentum. Every distraction weakens concentration. Every distraction delays progress. Imagine trying to fill a bucket with water while someone keeps poking holes in it. You continue pouring, but the bucket never fills. That is exactly what happens when focus is constantly interrupted. Effort is being applied, but results remain limited, because concentration never has time to develop. The average person underestimates the cost of switching attention. They believe they can multitask. But multitasking is largely a myth. Most people are not doing multiple things simultaneously. They are rapidly switching between tasks. And every switch creates friction. Every switch wastes energy. Every switch reduces performance. That's the key. Multitasking makes simple tasks take longer, and difficult tasks become nearly impossible. Yet people continue doing it. Because distraction feels productive. You answer messages, check updates, respond to notifications, jump between tabs, and at the end of the day, you feel busy. But being busy and being productive are not the same thing. A distracted person can be busy all day and accomplish very little. A focused person can accomplish more in 2 hours than a distracted person accomplishes in an entire day. That's the power of attention. Where attention goes, life follows. Think about social media for a moment. Social media itself is not the enemy. The problem is unconscious consumption. The problem is allowing algorithms to decide where your attention goes. Every platform is competing for one thing: your focus, your eyes, your mental energy. Because attention is valuable. Companies understand this. Advertisers understand this. The question is whether you understand it. Because if you don't control your attention, someone else will. That's guaranteed. You have a choice. You can become the owner of your attention, or you can become a product sold through it. Disciplined people make their choice carefully. They understand that every minute spent consuming is a minute not spent creating. Every minute spent reacting is a minute not spent building. Every minute spent distracted is a minute not spent improving. And over years, those minutes accumulate. Small distractions become massive consequences, just like small disciplines become massive results. This is why successful people often appear boring. They are not constantly chasing stimulation. They are not constantly seeking entertainment. They are not constantly looking for something new. They are focused on what matters, again and again, day after day, month after month, year after year, because focus compounds, just like repetition compounds. The ability to concentrate deeply on meaningful work is becoming a superpower, not because it is complicated, because it is uncommon. Let's make this practical. If you want better focus, stop trying to focus harder. Instead, remove distractions. Turn off unnecessary notifications. Create periods of uninterrupted work. Put the phone away. Close unnecessary tabs. Work on one thing at a time. One task. One objective. One focus. That's all. Simple. Not easy, but simple. Remember, focus is not a talent. Focus is a habit. Many people believe highly productive individuals were born with exceptional concentration. Not true. They trained it. They protected it. They developed it. Just like a muscle. And every time you choose focus over distraction, that muscle grows stronger. Every time you resist an interruption, that muscle grows stronger. Every time you complete deep work, that muscle grows stronger. Eventually, focus becomes part of your identity. You stop being someone who reacts to everything. You become someone who directs attention intentionally. That's power. That's discipline. That's freedom. Because freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. Freedom is the ability to control yourself. And self-control begins with attention. Where attention goes, life follows. Never forget that. If your attention belongs to everyone else, your future will too. Protect it. Guard it. Invest it wisely. Because your attention is building your future right now. Whether you realize it or not, you have learned to start before you feel ready. You have learned to win the first hour of the day. You have learned to do the hard thing first. You have learned to remove the option to quit. You have learned the power of repetition. And now you understand the importance of focus. But focus alone is not enough. Because discipline ultimately depends on one critical relationship. The relationship you have with yourself. And that relationship is built every time you either keep or break your word. Chapter 7. Keep promises to yourself. There is one relationship that determines the quality of every other relationship in your life. The relationship you have with yourself. Most people spend years trying to earn the trust of others, the respect of others, the approval of others. But they overlook something far more important. Can you trust yourself? Can you trust your own word? Can you trust yourself to do what you said you would do? Because if the answer is no, every goal becomes harder. every challenge becomes heavier. Every setback becomes more damaging. That's the key. Discipline is self-trust in action. Read that again. Discipline is self-trust in action. Most people think confidence is the foundation of success. It isn't. Self-trust is. Because confidence without self-trust is fragile. It disappears when adversity arrives. But self-trust creates resilience. Self-trust creates certainty. Self-trust creates strength. And self-trust is built one promise at a time. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, self-respect grows. Every time you break a promise to yourself, self-respect shrinks. The process is simple. The consequences are enormous. Think about how many promises people make to themselves every year. I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to start that business. I'm going to wake up earlier. I'm going to save money. I'm going to stop procrastinating. I'm going to change. The intention is sincere. The commitment feels real. For a moment, they believe themselves. Then the first obstacle appears, the first inconvenience, the first difficult day, the first moment of discomfort. And suddenly the promise disappears. Not because they lacked potential, because they lacked follow-through. And every broken promise leaves a mark. Maybe not immediately, maybe not visibly, but it leaves a mark. Because your mind is always watching. Your mind remembers. Every time you say you'll do something and don't do it, your mind records the evidence. Evidence that your word cannot be trusted. Evidence that your commitments are negotiable. Evidence that your goals are optional. Over time, this becomes dangerous. Not because other people lose faith in you, because you lose faith in yourself. And once self-trust begins to disappear, everything becomes harder. You start doubting your ability to change. You start doubting your ability to succeed. You start doubting your ability to follow through. Not because you're incapable, because you've trained yourself not to believe your own promises. That's the tragedy. Many people think they have a confidence problem. What they actually have is a self-trust problem. They don't believe themselves anymore. They've made too many promises and broken too many promises. You have a choice. You can continue weakening your relationship with yourself, or you can begin rebuilding it. And rebuilding it starts with one principle. Trust yourself by proving yourself. Remember that phrase. Trust yourself by proving yourself. Not by hoping, not by wishing, not by positive thinking, by proof. Real proof. Action-based proof. Because your mind responds to evidence. Imagine two people. The first person constantly says they will change. They make plans, set goals, create schedules, talk about the future, but rarely follow through. The second person says less, promises less, but consistently delivers. Who trusts themselves more? The answer is obvious, because trust is not built through intention. Trust is built through behavior. That's true in every relationship. And it's true with yourself. Think about someone who repeatedly lies to you. Eventually, you stop believing them. Not because you're negative, because they created a pattern. Now think about what happens when you repeatedly lie to yourself. I'll start tomorrow. I'll do it later. This is the last time. Next week will be different. Your mind hears those promises, then watches them break, again, and again, and again. Eventually, your subconscious reaches a conclusion. Your word means very little. And when that happens, motivation loses power. Goals lose power. Dreams lose power. Because belief disappears. That's why disciplined people are careful with commitments. They do not promise everything. They promise what they can execute. Then they execute. That's the key. The goal is not to impress yourself with ambitious promises. The goal is to build credibility with yourself. Because credibility compounds. Just like habits compound. Let's make this practical. Suppose you tell yourself you'll exercise every day for 2 hours. Sounds impressive. But if you fail after 3 days, what happens? Self-trust decreases. Now imagine a different approach. You commit to 10 minutes, and you complete it. Tomorrow you complete it again. Then again. Then again. Now evidence begins accumulating. Your mind starts noticing. You said you would do something, and you did it. That matters. More than most people realize, because trust is built through consistency, not intensity. Every promise kept becomes another brick in the foundation of self-respect. And eventually, that foundation becomes strong enough to support larger goals. The opposite is also true. Every broken promise weakens the foundation. That's why disciplined people understand something powerful. Small commitments matter. Very small commitments matter. Keeping your wake-up time matters. Finishing your workout matters. Reading your pages matters. Writing your goals matters. Completing the task matters. Not because any single action changes your life, because every action teaches your mind what kind of person you are. You are always casting votes. Votes for your identity. Votes for your character. Votes for your future. And your mind is counting every one of them. Trust yourself by proving yourself. Again and again. Day after day. Week after week. Month after month. That's how self-respect grows. Not through achievement alone. Through integrity. Integrity means your actions match your words. Integrity means your behavior matches your commitments. Integrity means you follow through. Even when nobody is watching. Especially when nobody is watching. Because the person who is always watching is you. And that person remembers everything. Many people spend years searching for confidence, when what they really need is evidence. Evidence that they can depend on themselves. Evidence that they can endure discomfort. Evidence that they can finish what they start. Evidence that their word means something. That's what discipline creates. Discipline creates proof. And proof creates trust. And trust creates confidence. The sequence matters. Most people try to start with confidence. Disciplined people start with action. The confidence comes later. You don't become trustworthy by believing you're trustworthy. You become trustworthy by repeatedly honoring your commitments. You don't become disciplined by thinking disciplined thoughts. You become disciplined through disciplined actions. That's the difference. Discipline is self-trust in action. Never forget that. Every promise you keep strengthens you. Every promise you honor builds self-respect. Every commitment you follow through on creates another layer of confidence. Not borrowed confidence. Earned confidence. The kind that survives difficulty. The kind that survives failure. The kind that survives setbacks. Because it is built on evidence, and evidence is powerful. You have learned to start before you feel ready. You have learned to win the first hour of the day. You have learned to attack difficult tasks. You have learned to remove the option to quit. You have learned the power of repetition. You have learned to protect your focus. And now you understand how self-trust is built. But there is one final shift that transforms discipline from something you do into something you are. Because lasting change happens when discipline stops being a behavior and becomes an identity. Chapter 8. Make discipline your identity. Most people try to change their lives by changing their actions. They create a new schedule, a new routine, a new goal, a new plan. And sometimes it works. For a few days, for a few weeks, occasionally for a few months. Then old habits return, old behaviors reappear, old patterns take over, and they wonder why. The answer is simple. They tried to change what they do without changing who they believe they are. That's the key. Lasting transformation is not built on behavior alone. It is built on identity. Because behavior follows identity. Remember that phrase. Behavior follows identity. The person you believe yourself to be will always influence the actions you take. Not perfectly, but consistently. If you see yourself as someone who quits, quitting becomes easier. If you see yourself as someone who procrastinates, procrastination becomes natural. If you see yourself as someone who lacks discipline, discipline feels unnatural. Your identity creates boundaries, and most people live inside those boundaries without realizing it. You have a choice. You can continue operating from an old identity, or you can deliberately create a new one. Because every extraordinary transformation begins with a shift in self-perception. Disciplined people stop asking what they feel like doing. They ask a different question. Who am I becoming? That question changes everything. Because feelings are temporary. Identity is powerful. Imagine waking up and asking yourself, what do I feel like doing today? The answer changes constantly. Some days you'll feel motivated. Some days you'll feel tired. Some days you'll feel inspired. Some days you'll feel distracted. Feelings move. Identity remains. Now imagine asking, what would a disciplined person do? Suddenly, the conversation changes. The focus shifts away from emotion. The focus shifts toward character. And character is far more reliable than emotion. That's why elite performers often appear different from everyone else. Not because they experience fewer emotions, not because they enjoy discomfort more, because they built identities around certain standards. The elite athlete doesn't merely work out. They see themselves as an athlete. The professional writer doesn't merely write. They see themselves as a writer. The successful entrepreneur doesn't merely build businesses. They see themselves as a builder, an owner, a creator. Their actions are reinforced by identity. And identity is powerful. Because people naturally seek consistency with who they believe they are. Think about someone who strongly identifies as a healthy person. They don't constantly negotiate over every meal. Their identity influences their decisions. Think about someone who identifies as a responsible parent. They don't need motivation to care for their children. Their identity drives behavior. The same principle applies to discipline. The goal is not simply to perform disciplined actions. The goal is to become a disciplined person. There's a difference. A person performing disciplined actions occasionally can still quit. A disciplined person sees discipline as part of who they are, and people protect their identities. That's the key. Behavior follows identity. Most people approach change backwards. They focus entirely on outcomes. I want to lose weight. I want more money. I want more success. I want better habits. Those goals are fine, but they're incomplete, because they focus on what you want, not who you must become. Disciplined people focus on identity first. Instead of saying, I want to write a book, they think, I am becoming a writer. Instead of saying, I want to get fit, they think, I am becoming someone who takes care of their body. Instead of saying, I want more discipline, they think, I am becoming a disciplined person. The difference may sound small, but the impact is enormous, because every action becomes evidence. Every workout becomes proof. Every page written becomes proof. Every promise kept becomes proof. Every difficult task completed becomes proof. Proof that the new identity is real, and proof matters. Remember what you learned in the last chapter. Trust yourself by proving yourself. The same principle applies here. Identity is strengthened through evidence, not imagination, not affirmations, evidence, real-world evidence. Your mind believes what it repeatedly sees. If you repeatedly see yourself showing discipline, your identity begins to change. If you repeatedly see yourself following through, your identity begins to change. If you repeatedly see yourself overcoming resistance, your identity begins to change. That's how transformation occurs. Not all at once. One vote at a time. Think of every action as a vote. Every workout is a vote. Every focused work session is a vote. Every healthy meal is a vote. Every promise kept is a vote. You are constantly voting for the person you are becoming, and eventually the votes accumulate. The identity becomes stronger. The new standard becomes normal. That's why small actions matter so much. Not because of their immediate impact, because of what they reinforce. A single workout may not transform your body, but it reinforces the identity of someone who trains. A single page may not create a book, but it reinforces the identity of a writer. A single disciplined choice may not change your life, but it reinforces the identity of a disciplined person. And identity changes everything. You have a choice. You can continue telling yourself old stories, or you can create new ones. Many people spend years repeating destructive identities. I'm lazy. I'm bad with money. I'm not disciplined. I'm not consistent. I'm not the type of person who succeeds. Those statements become self-fulfilling, because behavior follows identity. If you believe you're lazy, your actions will often support that belief. If you believe you're incapable, your behavior will often reinforce it. The story becomes the prison. That's why disciplined people become careful with the stories they repeat. Not because they ignore reality, because they understand reality can change. They focus on direction, not perfection. You don't need to become perfect overnight. You don't need to completely transform tomorrow. You only need to begin casting different votes, different actions, different evidence, different proof. Again and again, day after day, week after week, month after month. Eventually, the evidence becomes undeniable. You stop trying to become disciplined. You become disciplined. You stop trying to become focused. You become focused. You stop trying to become reliable. You become reliable. That's the power of identity. And once identity shifts, discipline becomes easier. Not effortless, but easier, because your actions stop fighting who you believe you are. They start supporting it. Behavior follows identity. Never forget that. The strongest habits are not built through force. They are built through alignment. Alignment between your actions and your self-image. Alignment between your standards and your behavior. Alignment between your future and your daily choices. That is where lasting change lives. You have learned to start before you feel ready. You have learned to win the morning. You have learned to attack difficult tasks. You have learned to remove the option to quit. You have learned the power of repetition. You have learned to protect your focus. You have learned to build self-trust. And now you understand how identity shapes behavior. But there is still one challenge that destroys countless goals. Because even after identity changes, there will be days when motivation disappears completely. And on those days, discipline faces its greatest test. Chapter 9. Learn to operate without motivation. Most people have been taught a dangerous lie. The lie is that motivation creates success. The lie is that you need to feel inspired before you act. The lie is that high performance begins with high emotion. It sounds good. It feels good. But it is not true. Because motivation is temporary. Discipline is dependable. That's the key. Motivation comes and goes. Discipline remains. Motivation depends on feelings. Discipline depends on standards. Motivation depends on emotion. Discipline depends on commitment. And commitment is far more reliable than emotion. Think about your own life. How many times have you felt incredibly motivated? A new goal, a new year, a new opportunity, a powerful video, an inspiring book, a sudden burst of energy. For a moment, everything feels possible. You create plans. You make promises. You see a brighter future. Then something happens. Life happens. The excitement fades. The energy drops. The mood changes. The inspiration disappears. And suddenly, the same goal that felt exciting now feels difficult. The same routine feels boring. The same commitment feels heavy. That's when most people stop. Not because the goal stopped mattering, because motivation stopped showing up. That's the trap. People become emotionally dependent on motivation, and anything you depend on emotionally becomes unreliable. Because emotions change, daily, hourly, sometimes minute by minute. You have a choice. You can build your life around feelings, or you can build your life around principles. One approach creates inconsistency. The other creates results. Remember this phrase: feelings are suggestions, not commands. Say it again. Feelings are suggestions, not commands. Your feelings are real, but they are not always right. Your feelings can suggest. They should not decide. Because if feelings controlled your actions, your future would be unstable. Some mornings you would work. Some mornings you wouldn't. Some days you would train. Some days you wouldn't. Some weeks you would pursue your goals. Some weeks you would quit. That is not discipline. That is emotional gambling. And emotional gambling produces unpredictable outcomes. Disciplined people understand something most people never learn. They stop asking themselves how they feel. They start asking themselves what needs to be done. That's the difference. Professionals understand this. Amateurs often don't. Think about surgeons. Do they only operate when they feel inspired? Of course not. Think about pilots. Do they only perform when motivation arrives? Of course not. Think about elite athletes. Do they train only when they feel excited? Absolutely not. Professionals perform because performance is the standard, not because motivation appears. That's why they succeed. The professional shows up regardless. The amateur shows up when it feels convenient. Progress belongs to those who continue regardless. Remember that phrase. Progress belongs to those who continue regardless. Regardless of stress. Regardless of boredom. Regardless of fatigue. Regardless of mood. Regardless of circumstances. Because consistency is born from commitment, not emotion. Consider a writer working on a book. There will be days when inspiration flows. Words come easily. Ideas appear naturally. Everything feels effortless. But there will also be days when the page feels empty. The mind feels tired. Nothing seems creative. Nothing feels exciting. The professional writer still writes. The amateur waits for inspiration. One finishes books. The other collects excuses. That's the difference. The same principle applies to every area of life. The entrepreneur continues building during difficult months. The athlete continues training during difficult seasons. The leader continues showing up during difficult years. The disciplined person continues acting during difficult moments. Not because they feel extraordinary, because they understand something extraordinary. Feelings are temporary. Standards are permanent. That's the key. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing that successful people experience less resistance. They don't. Successful people get tired. Successful people get discouraged. Successful people get stressed. Successful people experience doubt. Successful people lose motivation. The difference is not the absence of resistance. The difference is their response to resistance. Most people see resistance as a stop sign. Disciplined people see resistance as part of the process. When motivation disappears, they continue. When excitement fades, they continue. When progress slows, they continue. When results take longer than expected, they continue. Because they understand that persistence often matters more than talent. And persistence requires discipline, not motivation. Imagine two people pursuing the same goal. The first person works only when motivated. The second person works according to a schedule. At first, both appear committed, but eventually motivation disappears. It always does. The first person slows down. The second person continues. Months later, the gap becomes obvious, not because one person had superior ability, because one person relied on emotion, the other relied on discipline. Discipline wins. Again and again. Year after year. That's why disciplined people build systems. Systems continue when emotions fluctuate. Systems continue when energy drops. Systems continue when life becomes difficult. Systems remove the need to feel ready. Systems remove the need to feel inspired. Systems create consistency, and consistency creates results. You don't need motivation to follow a system. You need commitment. Commitment is different. Motivation says, "I'll do it when I feel like it." Commitment says, "I'll do it because I said I would." Motivation asks, "Do I feel ready?" Commitment asks, "What does the standard require?" Motivation depends on emotions. Commitment depends on character. And character is what ultimately shapes destiny. Remember what you've learned throughout this audiobook. You started before you felt ready. You won the first hour of the day. You attacked difficult tasks first. You removed the option to quit. You embraced repetition. You protected your focus. You built self-trust. You changed your identity. Every one of those lessons points toward the same truth. Action matters more than emotion. Always. Feelings are suggestions, not commands. The moment you understand that, everything changes. You stop treating discomfort as an emergency. You stop treating boredom as a signal to quit. You stop treating fatigue as a reason to abandon your goals. Instead, you see them for what they are: temporary experiences. Nothing more. They come. They go. They rise. They fall. And through it all, discipline remains. Think about the strongest people you know. Not physically, mentally, emotionally, professionally. The people who consistently achieve difficult things. The people who keep their word. The people who continue growing year after year. They all share one characteristic. They learned to operate without motivation. They learned to move without inspiration. They learned to perform without emotional certainty. And that skill changed everything. Because the majority of people stop when motivation disappears. The disciplined person begins there. The disciplined person keeps moving there. The disciplined person grows there. That's where separation occurs. That's where excellence is built. That's where extraordinary lives are created. Progress belongs to those who continue regardless. Never forget that. Not regardless because it's easy. Regardless because it's necessary. Because your future does not care how motivated you felt. Your future only reflects what you repeatedly did. And what you repeatedly do becomes who you become. You have learned nearly every principle required for lasting discipline. But there is one final lesson. One lesson that ties everything together. Because discipline is not a temporary challenge. It is not a 30-day project. It is not a seasonal effort. It is a lifelong practice. And mastering that truth changes everything. Chapter 10. Repeat the process for life. Most people treat discipline like a project, something they do for a few weeks, a few months, maybe a year. Then they expect to arrive somewhere, a place where growth becomes automatic, a place where effort is no longer required, a place where discipline is no longer necessary. But that place does not exist. That's the final lesson. Discipline is not a destination. It is a lifelong practice. There is no finish line. There is no final level. There is no moment when you graduate from discipline. Because the moment you stop practicing it, it begins to weaken. Just like a muscle. Just like a skill. Just like a habit. Discipline requires maintenance. That's the key. The people who achieve lasting success understand this. The people who lose success often forget it. Many people imagine successful individuals eventually reach a point where everything becomes easy. The truth is almost the opposite. The most successful people continue doing the fundamentals long after everyone else stops. They continue waking up with intention. They continue protecting their focus. They continue managing their habits. They continue showing up. Not because they have to, because they understand something powerful. The basics never stop working. Remember that phrase, the basics never stop working. Say it again. The basics never stop working. Human nature loves complexity. Human nature loves shortcuts. Human nature loves secrets. People constantly search for the next breakthrough, the next strategy, the next system, the next hack, the next advantage. And while they search for something new, they often abandon what already works. That's where many people go wrong. They become bored with the fundamentals. They become distracted by novelty. They chase excitement instead of effectiveness. Disciplined people think differently. They understand that success is usually boring. Success is often repetitive. Success often looks the same year after year. The same habits, the same standards, the same principles. Repeated consistently. Think about elite athletes. After winning championships, do they abandon training? No, they return to training. After achieving success, do they stop practicing fundamentals? No, they return to fundamentals. The best athletes in the world still work on basic movements, basic drills, basic techniques, not because they forgot them, because mastery requires maintenance. The basics never stop working. Think about successful business owners. The best entrepreneurs still focus on serving customers, creating value, solving problems, leading people. They don't abandon the fundamentals because success arrived. They double down on them. The same principle applies to every area of life: health, relationships, finance, personal growth, discipline. The fundamentals remain powerful forever. The problem is that people often confuse boredom with ineffectiveness. A workout routine becomes boring. A savings plan becomes boring. A productivity system becomes boring. A habit becomes boring. And because it feels boring, they assume it stopped working. But boredom is not evidence of failure. Boredom is often evidence of repetition. And repetition is where results are created. You have a choice. You can constantly chase new solutions, or you can master proven principles. One path creates distraction, the other creates progress. Long-term success comes from repeating what works, not from constantly searching for something different. Think about how often people restart. New year, new plan, new routine, new strategy, new promise, again and again, always beginning, rarely continuing. The disciplined person understands that success belongs to the continuer, the person who keeps going, the person who keeps showing up, the person who keeps repeating effective behaviors. Year after year, the basics never stop working. That's the key. Many people believe discipline means becoming perfect. It doesn't. Perfection is impossible. Discipline is not perfection. Discipline is returning. Returning after mistakes. Returning after setbacks. Returning after failure. Returning after bad days. Returning after difficult seasons. Everyone falls off track. Everyone. Even highly disciplined people. The difference is what happens next. Most people see a setback and quit. Disciplined people see a setback and return. That's why they continue growing. Not because they never fail, because they never stay down. Imagine missing one workout. Many people turn one missed workout into a missed month. One bad decision becomes a bad week. One mistake becomes an excuse. Disciplined people refuse to do that. They return immediately because they understand a powerful truth. One mistake rarely ruins progress. Quitting does. One bad day rarely destroys a habit. Abandoning the habit does. The goal is not perfection. The goal is consistency over time. That's what creates extraordinary results. Remember everything you've learned in this audiobook. You learned to start before you felt ready. You learned to win the first hour of the day. You learned to attack difficult tasks first. You learned to remove the option to quit. You learned the power of repetition. You learned to protect your focus. You learned to build self-trust. You learned to shape your identity. You learned to operate without motivation. Every lesson points toward the same truth. Success is built through repeated behaviors, not occasional effort. Repeated effort, not temporary discipline. Lifelong discipline. The challenge is that nobody can do the work for you. Nobody can build your habits. Nobody can create your discipline. Nobody can protect your attention. Nobody can keep your promises. Nobody can repeat your routines. That responsibility belongs to you. And that's good news, because it means the power belongs to you too. You have a choice. Every day, every morning, every decision. You can drift, or you can direct. You can react, or you can lead. You can wait, or you can act. You can quit, or you can continue. Those choices may seem small, but they compound. They compound into habits. Habits compound into character. Character compounds into destiny. And destiny is built one day at a time. Not in dramatic moments. Not in rare opportunities. In ordinary moments repeated without fail. That's why disciplined people never become obsessed with perfection. They become obsessed with continuation. They keep going. They keep improving. They keep returning to the fundamentals. Again, and again, and again. The basics never stop working. Wake up with intention. Protect your focus. Keep your promises. Do difficult things. Repeat effective habits. Trust the process. Continue regardless. These principles worked 10 years ago. They work today. They will work 10 years from now. Because human nature changes very little, and discipline will always matter. The world may change. Technology may change. Opportunities may change. But discipline remains valuable. Always. The disciplined person understands something most people spend their lives chasing. There is no secret. There is no shortcut. There is no magic formula. There is only consistent action. Repeated over time, long enough for results to appear, long enough for habits to compound, long enough for identity to change, long enough for extraordinary results to emerge. That is the process. That is the path. That is the answer. And now the question becomes simple. Will you repeat it? Tomorrow. Next week. Next month. Next year. For the rest of your life. Because extraordinary results come from ordinary actions repeated without fail, and the people who understand that truth never stop moving forward. They simply repeat what works, again, and again, and again. The basics never stop working. The difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is not luck. It is not talent. It is not intelligence. It is the daily habits they repeat when nobody is watching. They start before they feel ready. They win the morning. They do hard things first. They remove the option to quit. They repeat small actions relentlessly. They protect their focus. They keep promises to themselves. They build a disciplined identity. They work without motivation. And they repeat the process again and again and again. That is how ordinary people create extraordinary lives, not through one decision, not through one breakthrough, but through thousands of disciplined choices stacked on top of one another. So here is your challenge. Choose one habit from this audiobook. Not 10, not 5, 1. Commit to it for the next 30 days without negotiation. No excuses, no delays, no exceptions. Because your future is not created by what you do occasionally. Your future is created by what you do every single day. The question is simple. Will you continue repeating the habits that keep you where you are? Or will you begin repeating the habits that can change your life forever?